Are you surprised by that gap to Mercedes, and do you think you can take advantage at the start tomorrow? Because your starts seem to have been phenomenal in the practices we've seen.
I think what's clear is that they didn't show the engine power through any of the practice, because there's the whole talk of compression ratio, and they've obviously done a really solid job with their engine, which we have as well. But it would be interesting I want to understand why it's like 0.2 or more just through power per sector. And so if it is a compression thing, I want to understand why the FIA haven't done anything and what's being done to rectify it. But if it's not, and it's just pure ped, then we have to do a better job.
Can you imagine setting a lap so fast that even Lewis Hamilton, someone who knows Mercedes better than anyone, is left silently analyzing what just happened? Because that was exactly what happened at the Australian Grand Prix. George Russell unleashed a lap that left everyone looking at the stopwatch. But what was truly shocking was not just the time, but what Hamilton later began to reveal about that lap. Subtle comments, analysis between the lines, and a very clear reading of what is really going on with the new Mercedes. And if what Hamilton suggests is true, that lap by Russell could be the first sign that the balance of power in Formula One is about to change. The start of the Australian Grand Prix not only marked the beginning of a new Formula One season, it also represented the starting point of a completely different stage within the championship. Melbourne has always been a special setting to measure strength, because it is the first moment in which all the unknowns of the preseason begin to be resolved on the track. Teams, engineers, and drivers arrive with theories, simulations, and data accumulated over months, but Albert Park is the place where all of this first faces reality. And in that context, a lap appeared that quickly began to change the conversation within the paddock. George Russell's fast lap. The impact was not just the time recorded, but the margin. In Formula One, a tenth can be the difference between pole and third row, but Russell was riding with an advantage that clearly exceeded that usual scale. Initial analyses showed that the Briton had achieved a lap that left some of his closest competitors several tenths behind, a difference large enough to raise immediate doubts about whether Mercedes had found something special in its technical package. The most striking thing was that this performance did not seem to depend solely on perfect execution by the driver, but on a mechanical and aerodynamic base that allowed the car's potential to be exploited in a very effective way in qualifying. However, what was most fascinating was not simply the difference in performance between the two cars. What was truly important was the way in which Hamilton began to analyze what was happening on the track. Throughout the weekend, he left comments that, although apparently neutral, hid a very clear reading about the performance of the Mercedes. Hamilton explained that with the new technical rules, there is a key element that can make the difference between a competitive car and a truly dominant one: the harmony between the chassis, aerodynamic behavior, and management of the hybrid system during a fast lap. For someone who spent so many years within the Mercedes team, those words carry special weight. Hamilton is well aware of the technical philosophy that has characterized the team over the last decade and understands better than most how to build a car capable of producing that kind of explosive performance in qualifying. When he talks about the importance of synchronizing power delivery with aerodynamic balance, he is describing precisely the type of combination that can transform a good lap into a virtually unbeatable lap. And this is where Russell's return begins to take on a much deeper meaning. Because when what happened at Albert Park is analyzed in detail, the conclusion that many within the paddock began to reach is that that time was not simply the result of perfect execution by the driver. Rather, it seemed like evidence that Mercedes had found an extremely efficient way to exploit the new technical regulations. If the car can really generate those kinds of performance spikes when all the variables align, then the advantage Russell showed could be just a small taste of what the team is capable of. This explains why the impact of that lap was felt so strongly within the world of Formula One. Engineers, strategists, and analysts immediately began studying the available data, trying to understand where exactly that difference came from. In a championship where every thousandth is studied in detail, a lap that breaks the usual balance between the teams always raises questions. Is it a circumstantial advantage linked to a specific circuit? Or is it the first sign that a team has taken a step forward in interpreting the rules? The reaction inside the paddock was a mix of surprise and concern. Because if Mercedes really has found a way to maximize the car's efficiency in qualifying, then the season could take a very different turn than many expected before arriving in Australia. And when that possibility begins to take shape, even the most experienced rivals begin to observe the German team's every move much more closely. And the most interesting thing of all is that the clue that points towards this interpretation did not come from an engineer, nor from a technical analyst, nor even from someone within the Mercedes team itself. It came from Lewis Hamilton, A driver who knows better than anyone how that structure works and who, with just a few seemingly innocent statements, hinted that George Russell's fastest lap could be much more significant than it seemed at first glance. Hamilton began talking about something that may seem simple, but in modern Formula One is extremely complex: the way the car manages energy during a flying lap. In current single-seaters, performance does not depend solely on engine power or aerodynamic load. The key is how all the car's systems are combined at the same moment. Energy recovery, hybrid system deployment, aerodynamic stability, and mechanical balance must work in perfect synchrony to produce a truly competitive lap. According to Hamilton, when a team manages to make all these elements work as a single perfectly coordinated system, the result can be devastating for rivals in qualifying. And that description matched too well what had been seen on Russell's return. The Mercedes seemed to have an extraordinary ability to accelerate out of corners, maintain stability in the fast sections, and make the most of the energy deployment on the straights. He wasn't just fast at one point on the circuit, it seemed efficient throughout the layout. This is what led many within the paddock to interpret that Mercedes could have found a particularly effective solution within the new technical regulations. In each rule change there is always a period in which some teams manage to interpret the car's possibilities better than others. Sometimes that advantage is small, but other times it can set the course of an entire season. The big question that began to arise in Australia was precisely that: had Mercedes found an interpretation of the regulations that the rest had not yet deciphered? Meanwhile, Ferrari was still trying to understand its own car. Hamilton recognized that the adaptation process was being more complex than he expected. The SF26 showed moments of promising speed, but it was still a car that required a lot of work to find the ideal balance. There were sessions in which the Briton managed to get very close to Mercedes times, even being practically equal at some specific moment, but the general sensations continued to be one of exploration and learning. The team was collecting information, testing settings, and trying to understand how to unlock the car's full potential. This difference between the two projects also explains why Hamilton analyzed the situation so clearly. From Ferrari, he was experiencing firsthand how difficult it can be to find the perfect operating window in a new car. That's why when I saw the behavior of the Mercedes on the track, I could immediately recognize that that car seemed to be operating in a much more comfortable range. And in Formula One, when a car is within its ideal window, the driver can extract performance with an ease that sometimes seems almost unreal. In other words, Russell's fast lap wasn't just a display of driving talent. It was the combination of a confident driver, a balanced car, and a technical performance that seemed to be working better than many rivals. When these three factors coincide at the same time, the result is usually a return that leaves everyone wondering how it is possible to make such a difference in a sport where every thousandth is fought for obsessively. And that is why Hamilton's words generated such an impact. It was not an explosive statement or a direct accusation. It was something much more interesting. An implicit analysis that suggested that behind that return there could be something deeper than simply a good moment of form. For many in the paddock, hearing Hamilton speak that way was almost like receiving a silent warning. Because if your reading is correct, then George Russell's fastest lap at the Australian Grand Prix might not just be an early season anecdote. It could be the first clue that Mercedes has found a technical advantage that the rest of the grid is still trying to understand. The interesting thing is that Russell's return seems to have fit perfectly within that logic. The Mercedes was not only fast in a specific sector of the circuit, nor did it depend solely on straight-line speed or downforce in fast corners. The car seemed to run with very balanced efficiency throughout the entire lap. That kind of behavior is precisely what engineers look for when trying to maximize the performance of a modern car. A car that doesn't have an isolated strong point, but rather a complete package that works well in every phase of the lap. And when a team achieves that kind of balance, the driver can attack the circuit with a completely different confidence. Each braking becomes more precise, each change of direction more stable, and each acceleration more effective. It is not just about having a fast car, but about having a car that allows the driver to exploit every thousandth of the circuit without feeling like he is constantly fighting against the limit of the car. That's exactly what many observed in Russell that weekend. Driving it conveyed a feeling of total control, as if the car responded perfectly to every input it received from the steering wheel. That confidence does not appear by chance. Normally, it is the result of a car that is in a very comfortable operating window, something that in Formula One can make an enormous difference compared to rivals that are still searching for the ideal balance. The Australian Grand Prix is usually just the first chapter of a long season, full of changes, evolutions, and surprises. But sometimes, even at the beginning of the championship, moments occur that leave a clear sign of what could come next. George Russell's fastest lap at Albert Park was one of those moments that forces the entire paddock to stop and stare. It wasn't just a quick turn in a training session. It was a return that showed a level of performance that many did not expect to see so early in the season. The difference in the timer, the consistency of the pace, and the way the Mercedes seemed to behave on track immediately generated a wave of questions among teams, engineers, and analysts. And in Formula One, when too many questions appear at once, it usually means someone has found something special. But what ended up turning that lap into a topic of conversation throughout the paddock was the reading that Lewis Hamilton made from the other side of the grid. Without launching accusations, without explosive statements, and without directly pointing out his former team, the seven-time world champion hinted at something that many began to seriously consider. When he explained how the new cars depend on the harmony between aerodynamics, chassis, and energy management, he was describing exactly the type of technical combination that can turn a car into an absolute benchmark in qualifying. And that description fit all too well with what had been seen in Russell's return. Meanwhile, Ferrari continues in the process of discovery with the SF26. Hamilton continues to adapt to a car that still requires time to understand its ideal operating window, an obvious contrast to a Mercedes that seems to have found a very solid base from the beginning. That difference in context explains why Russell's return attracted so much attention within the world of Formula One. It wasn't just about speed, but the feeling that a team could have taken a step forward in the interpretation of the regulations. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.